G'day guys, Carl from Go Travel. Today we are taking the donkey down to lift it. Probably tell my voice is a bit funny, absolutely dying today, and I forgot to film the intro, so the intro and outro will be the exact same, me dying. This video is going to be a controversial one. We are going to lift the Ranger. We're going to play with something that is already perfectly on point. So let's see how this plays out. Let's get some rough heights. Looking at about 58 in the front currently, and about, what's that, 62 and a half in the back. Let's go make this happen. No, I haven't done anything. I don't know, there's too many buttons, it's too flash for me. It is amateur hour. Righto, we've got the donkey pulled to pieces. Spring's going in. So we're doing 2 and 1, King Springs. I believe the part number's 123, 124, something like that. Jay is an expert at doing this because he's done a few of them already, and he's actually got his own Raptor Ranger as well. So the coolest thing about this is now with forescan, you can actually calibrate ride height positioning sensor, but I'll get Jay to explain that because he knows the nitty gritty better than what I do. I'll just show you his rig out here. Jay actually runs a spacer in the front of his. What I will do is I'll get Jay to explain the pros and cons of spacers versus springs, because he's adamant that I need to run 35s and I should have spacers, but I'll get Jay to explain that. So you can actually get black coils. We ended up just getting yellow ones because I'm impatient. I'm impatient at what I've done. So what yellow ones didn't have to wait for, black ones have to wait for. You see there's just basically more windings on the spring. A little bit thicker, a little bit different spring rate, but the physical length of the shock obviously doesn't change. Righto, I'm gonna get Jay to explain this because I'm going against Jay's advice on this one. I'm going springs. Jay doesn't reckon that's the best option for what I'm gonna do. So hit us with it. What do you reckon?
Well, there's a couple different ways you sort of lift these Raptors nowadays. It's just becoming a bit of a controversial topic over there, the old Facebook chats. You can do the springs, which Caleb's doing here. We can do the spacers on the top, which personally I like, without many load on the front. Spacers seem to be the way to go, particularly if you're going to run 35s. 35s do actually hit the guards in these things on full up travel without spacers. So if you are running 35s, keep it in mind, spacers are recommended to keep that clearance. Springs, they're really good, particularly the Kings ones. Really, all they're doing is adding a little bit extra spring rate on there to lift that up. This is the way you need to go if you're going to add bull bars, weights and things like that, because you are changing rates. You need that extra weight capability of the spring. The other way is, that's sort of coming out a little bit recently, is it's like a collet that sits in between this bit and the actual shock body. Basically all that's doing is compressing the factory spring. It's the exact same as putting a spring on it. You're really not doing any different than that. So either way to go, my opinion, if you've got no extra weight on the front and you're running 35 particularly, spacers are the go. If you're going to end up putting a bull bar on it, anything like that, springs are the go. But if you're only running springs, keep in mind your 35 will still hit the guard if you manage to get full up travel.
So why does a spacer keep the 35 off the guard? What does a spacer do differently than a spring?
Basically, you've got the entire length of the shock here. The entire actual length of the shock is your down travel eventually. So you're putting a spring in it, isn't going to change the actual overall length of the strut. You're only sort of raising where the car sits normally. Same with those collets, you're not changing that overall length. When we go spacer, the spacer then obviously sits on top, which then adds that little bit extra length to the entire length of the strut, which means brings the entire travel slightly down and limits the amount of up travel you have fully.
So creates clearance for the 35.
Exactly right. So it gets that extra bit of clearance on that up travel.
Now, when we go 37s,
yes,
we can
37s, we need a combination of all this, but we get really big height. The Raptors obviously run these Fox, they're internal bypassing. One thing I do prefer running the spacers on these over the springs when you've got no weights or anything like that. When you're doing a spring instead of the spacer lift, you are actually then coming into a play and affecting the internal bypassing, which is mechanical. Like, it's not an electric thing that can be reset or anything like that or recalibrated. It's a mechanical point. So you're getting closer to that top end of the stroke, which is getting to that stiff end of the internal bypassing where the car's expecting you to be jumping or something and starting to stiffen it up to be prepared. That's why I somewhat prefer the spacers on these things, because it doesn't actually affect anything to do with the internal bypassing. and we can recalibrate with all the live valve stuff later on.
There's a reason that these front springs are not going in the bin today. These are actually going to come home with me because I'll probably be back here in 3 months getting Jay to do what he told me to do to start with.
Yeah.
But we'll see how it goes. We'll see how this plays out. Alright. 2 and 1. Get some better shots of this once it's out from the hoist, but that is sitting pretty level. Wheel alignment time, remember, lift your rigs, get them wheel aligned, because obviously angles change, so choose your tyres out. So get them wheel aligned.
Settle the springs in, mate.
Yeah, all good. I'm sure neighbours love you guys. It feels right, like you couldn't do that in a normal full drive.
Oh no, that's not like
Nah, that's
not at,
cool.
Like, not at 60.
Yeah,
And not as easy.
it still feels alright, but Jay's going to do something cool with this thing. So we're going to bust out foreskin and we're going to play around with the, what is it, the height sensor, position sensor?
Yeah, so the ride height calibration on these things. You actually go in and reset where your factory heights are to bring the live valving back to where they're meant to be.
So we'll reset that and then we'll take it for another burn and see if it's any different.
Hit read there. So as we can see, both fronts are at 36mm height extra.
Yep.
And the rear obviously only come up a little bit, as that's all it was meant to do.
Yep.
So this here is basically what the live valve's reading when you're driving around all day, every day,
Yep.
to detect what to do. So when you're at 40mm above factory, it's thinking that's lifting the front up consistently
Yep.
and adjusting to suit.
So basically you recalibrate that and then it now knows that this height is now the new 0.
Basically,
and then,
yeah. Obviously these cars all have the live valve Fox suspension. They run ride heights at every corner, like ride height sensors. After you lift them, that obviously puts the ride height above a 0 point. So what these cars do under acceleration, when they detect the front lifting, they'll actually stiffen the front shocks to just stop that lift. Same under braking, it'll stiffen that shock. Around turns, it'll stiffen the outers, everything like that. They're quite dynamic actually in the way they work. So when you're, as in this case, 40mm higher in the front than what we were from factory, the live valving is now thinking you're constantly picked up in the front, so it'll be stiffening those front shocks to match that, thinking it's accelerating all the time. Go back in, calibrate that to bring the live back to where it's meant to be, which will bring the ride quality back to where factory meant to be, and that live valving working how it's meant to.
now the Ranger doesn't know that it's sitting high, so like Jay said, the valving should work like factory, so it should do everything. It'll still be a little bit stiffer because of the spring rate.
Exactly right, yeah. So we are lifting it, which is in terms of making it, you're putting a slightly higher spring rate in to lift it. That's how a taller spring works at the end of the day. Yeah, bringing that valving back, the live valving back down to where factory is meant to be, helps significantly.
So we'll have to do this for a burn and see how it goes. Yeah, I feel like that felt less rigid. Yeah, I think it feels.
For sure.
Yeah.
It takes away the first initial sort of bit of firmness to it.
Yeah, like that sort of first bit of a jolt.
It makes sense because the live valving was thinking that front was lifted, sort of stiffening it to keeping from lifting under acceleration. Yeah. Now that we've eliminated that, it's back to its plush point.
So the donkey's all done, dusted, lifted, got the king springs, front and rear, sits a little bit higher. We will get exact measurements on this so we do know. I don't think it's a lot higher. I think it's just enough to be noticeable. So what do we got? Center hub to guard. We're sitting at about 62 in the front now, so which is pretty close to that 40mm. We've got probably about 63.5, 64, something like that. So again, not a lot in the back. I honestly think it is just enough to make a subtle difference. One thing I'll say is I definitely know there's springs in it. I can tell the difference when I drive it. Don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing. It's just a little touch tighter and you notice it's tighter. I still quite like it. I think it's good. But I think if you're after ride quality, I reckon the factory springs are definitely a smoother, softer ride. So I think Jay's right on this one. I think if you only want a little bit of height, strut spacers are the go in the front. In the back, I still would do springs either way in the back because it's going to help with load carrying. Obviously, these things can't carry a heap of weight. Anything you can do to help it out, You'd be surprised at how little weight in the back actually changed the way these things sit in squat, because they are quite soft from factory. Look, is the ride terrible? Absolutely not. It's still an unreal ride. The suspension's still unreal. It still performs like it should. Everything still does what it should do. This is going to be a tough one to call. It's all about personal preference, I'd say, at the end of the day. Look, like I said, I still love it. I still think it's great. I still think it rides and performs awesomely. Was it better with the factory springs? I actually reckon it was. This one's always going to be a controversial video, so smash me in the comments. Like it, love it, hate it, whatever. Comment it below. I'm expecting a why stuff with something that's awesome comment. And look, you're right. For me, I think the little bit of height, I do like the way it looks. It's not a lot, but it's just enough to be noticeable. Anyway, as always, if you like what you see, feel free to subscribe. And until next time, go travel.